Pete, President Trump has been reelected president once again. A lot's going to change in autonomy. President's already made a public statement about EVTOLs and ushering the golden age of EVTOL. Are we going to usher in the golden age of autonomy under a second Trump administration?
I'm going to lean toward yes on that, Grayson. I think that there's a lot in the autonomy space that plays right into the idea that deregulation will help usher in industry innovation. And this might be exhibit one in that case. And I will also like to note on the beginning there, is it a golden age of eVTOL? I think it's the beginning of that age. And President-elect Trump will likely benefit from some of the rules and frameworks that the Biden administration just put into place within the last few weeks. So we'll see that take off, no pun intended, in the years ahead.
Vertically take off. We got to be careful there, not take off. Vertically take off. And was about a month ago, we had the news Lilium went under. They filed for BK. Does Toyota end up owning the electric vertical takeoff and landing market through Joby? Do they continue to buy up shares in Joby and really take it over?
I think that they certainly can be the leader. I think there's still a lot of consolidation in the industry yet to occur. It's so early. Nobody's offering commercial service in the United States yet. So there's a lot to be determined. But I certainly think Toyota is a leader, and I think there's a strong argument to say the preeminent leader right now in that front.
Because you have Archer, which has a very public partnership with United. Then you have Wisk and Stellantis. You've got Wisk. I feel sorry. I know the Wisk folks. Sorry, you're owned by Boeing. You could be you sold this because of the economic situation at Boeing, especially if the war in Ukraine comes to an end. And I talked to a lobbyist about this, the amount of money you make from that, pretty astronomical. So if we do have consolidation and we do have commercial operations during a Trump administration, this goes back into autonomy in the early days. Is there consumer trust to go up in one of these? Do the consumers, do you think, are they ready to go on electric vehicle takeoff and landing?
Do you mean in a human piloted aircraft or in a autonomous piloted aircraft? Because I think my answer is different for those two things.
Human, because if you look at someone like my father-in-law, he won't get on a Cessna because he's afraid it's going to crash. And the Cessna's been tested various different type parts from the FAA, very safe plane. Him not going through, or does this become a Gen Z, a Gen X generation where they say, "Oh, it's cool, all right, just hop on and away we go"?
I think it's more the latter. I don't even know if the age demographic is the key differentiator, but to me, I think it's, especially in air travel, that trust component is so important. And I think that eVTOLs will need to have a proven, demonstrable safety record in commercial operation before they kind of rise to a critical mass of people who trust that. And as we know, trust is built over a long period of time and quickly lost as well. So that is one factor that will also play into that.
It's going to have to be a delicate balance as these companies grow up. But then here's the interesting thing. I don't have any data, but I love your opinion on this. If on the side of the eVTOL, if it was Brenda United, Delta American, do you feel that would help build trust?
I do. And we'll see. I know obviously United, Delta, and others are investors in some of these companies, but they will be putting their trust brand on the line if they put that on the side of an eVTOL aircraft. So I think they will also want to see that tremendous safety record before they make that step.
A lot of steps are happening. There was a report coming out that President-elect Trump has set up a situation room in Mar-a-Lago with one consistency happening there. Elon Musk having a very, very big presence there. I could tell you yesterday, I'm in the vicinity of Mar-a-Lago. I counted 60 Teslas yesterday. There's a lot more Teslas out here than normal. I'm just putting that out there for the fact, because I started counting Teslas because why not? Just why not? If having President Trump having Mr. Musk's ears, Mr. Musk clearly has two things that he wants, actually three things outside the political stuff. Mr. Musk wants to grow Tesla. Mr. Musk is clearly betting the future of the company on autonomy. And Mr. Musk clearly wants to see humanoid robots become mainstream. How much influence do you imagine Mr. Musk will have pushing President-Trump-elect towards the national autonomous vehicle framework that includes trucks weighing over 10,001 pounds?
I think he'll have considerable sway over that. It wasn't that long ago, not that long, I mean, maybe about a month ago, that President-elect Trump gave a speech at the Detroit Economic Club here in Michigan and said that he was afraid of autonomous vehicles, and not just Chinese ones, but autonomous vehicles writ large. And within weeks, within days, probably, Musk was actively campaigning for him in Pennsylvania. And I think, it remains to be seen exactly what the policy is. But I think, to answer your question, I think Elon Musk will have considerable sway and influence over how the Department of Transportation handles regulation and what laws do or do not get proposed in Congress.
Look at the run up of the Tesla stock over the last week. It's almost up 40%. Webbush is out here, and I'm going to quote this, and from Dan Ives at Webbush. We believe the Trump White House win will be a game changer for the autonomous and AI story for Musk and Tesla, end quote. That's clear. Is this investors betting on that FSD might work? That it might truly scale because of the regulatory environment? Technical aside, but the regulatory environment.
Well, I mean, that's a big part, though, Grace. I can't go technical aside because will FSD work is ultimately not a political question. Whether its rollout has accelerated or given headwinds by politics and policy is a different question. But will FSD work is fundamentally a question to be answered by Tesla engineers. One of the interesting things about Elon in this particular election cycle and how it relates to the growth of his particular brand of autonomy and autonomy writ large is he said in late October that, and I wrote down the exact quote here. There should be federal approval process for autonomous vehicles. Up is down, down is up. Grayson, this is the Republican Party here that is notoriously anti-regulation. And here in that quote, I hear Elon saying that he almost wants to take NHTSA, which has no pre-market approval for anything these days, and implement that sort of pre-approval process, that there should be approval is revolutionary in a lot of ways. So I'm not sure what to make of that, but it probably speaks to, at the very least, his influence on whatever's coming down from the top.
Could it be to keep Chinese AVs off the roads of America? Could that be what it is?
If I'm going to play conspiracy theorist here a little bit further, not so much China, but what about other autonomy competitors already operating here in America today? If Elon has to give a green light to, say, any other company that's seeking to remove steering wheels and pedals or set up a particular brand of service, particularly on the robotaxi front, that would be a competitor to the cybercab. That, I guess if I was Google right now, I'd be very uneasy about the current situation with Elon dictating policy.
Google's made a lot of mistakes as it relates to their interactions with Tesla, both publicly and privately. The tactics that Waymo has taken behind the scenes are frankly childish, frankly inappropriate, and Mr. Musk and the team at Tesla are well aware of it, so perhaps they do reenact revenge. I'm not saying they will. I'm not advocating for them. I'm saying perhaps they might. Could this be, outside of Mr. Musk's personal gain, outside of any of this, could Waymo be reading the tea leaves? Because we saw it in the last early stages of the Biden administration, before Harris got the appointment. She wasn't elected. She got an appointment. And before she lost the election, we started to see all these photos pop up on Reddit, on X, of the Zeekr going around San Francisco testing. The last month or so, crickets. There have been no Zeekr sightings in San Francisco. Is the writing on the wall for the Zeekr?
I think, yeah. The answer to, there's a lot to cover in what you just said, but to answer the last part of it first, yes, I think the writing is on the wall for the Zeekr. And of course that they would limit at a moment where putting a Chinese vehicle on American roads is a very delicate political statement. That's probably an understatement. I think that, the Zeekr did arrive for testing this summer, and I don't know how many of them they ultimately got, but I guess I would say if I was in charge of Waymo, I probably would not be having a big public display of those vehicles right now either, when Chinese EVs in America is a key political lightning rod. I think the key question for Waymo here is, as they kind of undertake this massive expansion, which continued, by the way, today with public service starting in Los Angeles, open to the public, driverless commercial, whole kitchen sink. To me, like, how many vehicles do they need to run Phoenix, Los Angeles, San Francisco, let's call it Austin, because that's supposed to start early next year. How many vehicles do they have? How many do they need to do that effectively? And how do they bridge from now until the Ioniq 5s are ready to make that happen? Like, they may be constrained by the number of vehicles they have. That's just my speculation. But with the Zeekr not necessarily, accelerating right now, as you just said. I don't know this, but I suspect that the Zeekr will fade from our memories because of the tariffs levied by Biden, of course. Waymo has been lose-lose in both the current administration and the incoming one. But I do wonder if their expansion will be constrained by lack of vehicle supply here at some point. I think is an important question to answer.
Yes, I believe so. I would say they're probably in the mid thousands. I believe that California is around 995. Let's just call it 1,000 vehicles,
Vehicles right now, I think it's less.
including retrofits that are being built, not currently on the road. The issue that we're going to have to tackle as an industry, and this is not just Waymo, this is everybody, we need technicians. We need maintenance. We need mechanics that can fix the vehicles, that can collaborate the LiDARs, that can work on systems. We saw that with the SUNY college that Waymo's doing it, but I've been advocating for this for a long time. We really need to ramp up the technicians, individuals that can work on this, because that's going to be a bottleneck once Waymo really truly gets going at scale. And then obviously you have all the depots and all the various different things that go along with that. And then Waymo is very fortunate that they can self-insure through Alphabet. They're their captive, and then go to a reinsure. But insurance, we see from Uber's earnings, is going to be a big issue. The question is, before the JLR goes away on December 31st, how many of those vehicles can Waymo buy? How many can they get upfitted and ready to go? And if they are constrained by vehicles, and I believe that is going to be an issue, does Atlanta get delayed? Or do you see, say, 12 vehicles, 24 vehicles in Atlanta? And then how does it look going into 25? Does Waymo publicly announce 2 cities, 3 cities, or can they only announce 1 because of vehicle constraints?
It's a good question. I think that, boy, what do I think? I think it's probably important, first and foremost, that as Waymo goes through this big expansion, that they get the little things right. As you know, and I know, this industry is only as strong as its latest big crash. Uber found that out the hard way. Cruise found that out the hard way. Statistically speaking, Waymo is going to have a significant incident at some point, right? Like, it's just math. I think we know that. And I think that they have built the relationships with government officials, with regulators, that they could withstand that. But how does the general public react? I think that's going to be a key question as to how this happens, how transparent they are when it happens. And it'll be interesting timing, Grayson, because as we're talking about with the incoming administration, I expect this innovation autonomy push from the Trump administration, both in terms of federal law and regulations within the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Just to play out the scenario, right? Let's say some of that is being discussed and hanging in the balance in a public way, and then a big incident happens. At that moment, it could really, really impact the ability to push some of these things forward right at the time that, ostensibly this moment has arrived where we're going to see a pro-industry push from the administration. So maybe they want to slow walk things for a while just to make sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and make sure that they have their house in order before continuing a big expansion.
They did that when they were going for their California Public Utilities Commission. They pulled most of the vehicles off the road. Cruise didn't. And unfortunately, we saw what happened there. I'm going to put my political hat on here for a moment. If I'm running Waymo, I'm doing 2 tactical things to build influence. 1, I'm deploying Waymo vehicles in Palm Beach, in West Palm, because the Trump officials coming in and out, and you can pick up at the airport here legally. Thank you, Governor Scott and Governor DeSantis, for allowing that. Coming and going Waymo, you start to build that influence. They get accustomed to your technology as they're here, and they're all coming here every day in and out. Then I'd run a small constrained ODD for the inauguration. Move VIPs, not open to the public, move VIPs from inauguration hotels to balls. Really start to build influence. That's how you get tactical and really start to build that influence, because you and I know, going back 2 decades that we've been in this, that it all changes when somebody goes for a ride in the vehicle. It all changes.
That I would agree. I'm not so sure I'd start running small services to the inauguration. I'm thinking Waymo had this incident within the last couple of days where they interrupted a Veterans Day parade. It's very similar to the Chinese New Year incident that happened. Not in the latter where someone set one of their vehicles on fire, but I don't know if I would go near big public events right now. But to your point that people love the service when they experience it, I think that is the tactical or strategic thing right now. Is you look at San Francisco and how Waymo's become a tourist destination. It's a big deal. People like these vehicles. You look in Los Angeles right now among the early rider club, people like these vehicles. the wait list is 300,000 customers like waiting for today for the grand opening of service. So I think that, and there's a recent JD Power survey that also shows that when people experience this technology, they really like it and it dramatically changes public opinion. So if I was putting my Waymo hat on and sitting in an executive chair, I think that I would ensure that that continues, like double down on your strength. That's it. Make sure service is seamless, make sure it's safe, and that you're doing everything you can. And again, Waymo has not had this big incident. So I'm just a bit of a nervous Nelly, I guess. But I would be thinking, I am going through my safety case. I am going through whatever worst case scenario training exercises I run. Customer experience right now has to be seamless, and that starts with safety.
It does, and we're seeing this goes to Evercore ISI. They did 1,000 rides. It was in this week in the Autonomy Economy newsletter. Wait times are going down, prices are going down. So obviously the service is clearly maturing. If you're in the Waymo executive chair, how nervous are you that Zoox is starting to run the toaster or the Zoox mobile around San Francisco? And I ask that because the videos that I've seen, there's been a chase car and a lead car. This thing has not been on its own. It's had a chaperone or a parent or a guardian, whatever term you want to use. This thing has not been on its own. And then it was in the local San Francisco paper, and I have to independently verify this. And last time I was with Zoox, this is a long time ago. They don't exactly like me right now. Is in the paper it said that they have no ability to remotely control the vehicle. I don't buy that. If that's the case, you've got some serious issues because Waymos have the ability to be remote controlled. Zooxes have the ability to be remote controlled. And this was in the local news. And it was a statement from a Zoox representative. And if that's a faux pas, that goes back to one of the worst PR communication jobs that we have ever seen in the history of autonomy.
That's a statement. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I would have to verify that too, whether or not they can remotely control a vehicle. And that, frankly, like a local news report, like they may have, there's some nuance in, are you directly controlling the vehicle from a driving station that's somewhere else? Are you issuing directions to a vehicle and then the vehicle executes those directions itself? Like there's some nuance to that. I guess I would have to look into that more before, really saying something about it. But one thing that I think is interesting with the Zoox vehicles is obviously they do not have steering wheels or traditional controls. So let's just say a Zoox vehicle becomes stuck, like we saw with a lot of the cruise clustering incidents in San Francisco a year and a half ago, 2.5 years, where then they had to wait for a human to come and drive those cars away. Like Zoox is interesting because they're saying that they have so much confidence in their technology that they're not going to have incidents like that. And that's why perhaps they've been slow to put that vehicle on the road. But they can't send a human to go rescue a vehicle like Cruise did with those. Like this is a more complex operation because of the type of vehicle they're putting on the road. And I think it says a lot about their confidence level that they are saying, hey, we're now putting this in public road testing.
I agree with the confidence. I can't go grab Barney Rubble and Fred Flintstone and go yabba dabba do and push this thing. It's not going to work. If you're telling me this thing gets stuck and you have no remote operation, what do? Do you get the Flints, Barney and Fred? Do you get a tow truck? It just goes back. You're in the media business. There's certain things, and you go through media training and certain things that you say and that you don't say, because what you're doing right now, me as an analyst, you're eroding my trust and confidence in the company when you're putting out a public statement that says this, because you could have an incident and it's an unfortunate trend, and we've seen it on the Waymo subreddit where people think it's fun to graffiti, to do not nice, inappropriate things to Waymos.
No question.
Well, they start doing that to Zoox, and then all suddenly, I'll just give you a weird scenario. Humans are smart, especially criminals. They're always smarter. They're smarter than most people for the most part. What if some criminal or some bad guy, don't laugh, decided to get four red bricks? I give you a kid's story in that, but I'm going to refrain from that. You get 4 bricks or cinder blocks and you block the tires. What are you going to do? You're going to call the police? They're not going to come in San Francisco.
Well, I mean, are you robbing the passenger? Is that the scenario you're laying out? Like it's like the 21st century edition of like Billy the Kid riding up to the train and then running away. Like that's interesting. Like fundamentally, I guess that's a criminal problem and not a robo-taxi problem. Although, I mean, the Venn diagrams do overlap a little bit, but I think we need to have stringent punishment for criminals who, rob anyone or deface a vehicle of any kind, robotaxi or not. Like ultimately that's the problem.
They need to make an example of somebody. Waymo, I said this to him, that they're afraid of rocking the political boat. They rocked your boat. They destroyed property. You have it on camera. You don't have Garcon. He's out. Bye bye. He's out in LA. So you actually have somebody that was willing to prosecute there. I don't understand why they're not making a stance, but think about it from a scary standpoint. If there's remote operation with the Zoox mobile, you can move it or power it to get out of that situation, potentially get to a safer location. But if it's blocked in like that, you're trapped. And if there's people in there, God willing, they're safe. But it just seems like it's a classic unforced error. And I should start a leaderboard for unforced errors, and I'll put the Waymo Zeekr 1 and the Zoox PR communications 2.
What's your elaborate on that? What exactly is your Zoox unforced error right now? I'm not sure I follow that one.
The Zoox unforced error for me is their communications to the market, their communications and statements such as this. And there's a laundry list of statements like that are eroding.
Just regarding the remote operation aspect or the teleoperation aspect?
Yes, that's just the latest in a long running list of public faux pas to build trust, because it's going to hurt the whole industry. That's why I harp on it, because it hurts the whole industry, and then it starts to create this narrative. And it's really interesting. I was talking to a large institutional investor today about this, and he says, Gray, if you notice, the coverage has turned on autonomy, where it's getting negative across the board. And this has mostly happened after the election of President Trump and Elon. The autonomy coverage has just started to skew negative, negative, negative. It's even coming from the press. TechCrunch has turned negative on it. What they did to poor Ben Horowitz, the hit piece they did on him about all the money he's donated to the Las Vegas Police Department. There just seems to be like it's fun to eat your own, and that's really a sad issue. And they're feeding into that with a statement like this.
I have not seen the TechCrunch story you're talking about, and I have, frankly, I'm a little surprised to hear in what is it, a week and a half roughly since the election. I don't know that I would agree with the idea that the overall media sentiment has turned negative toward autonomy. If anything, I think we have the Waymo robotaxi expansion in Los Angeles. And I think you have the broader idea that, like it or not, I guess, that automated vehicles are probably going to be on a faster track now in the newfound administration. So I think that there's some very important questions to ask specifically about Tesla FSD and Elon's role. I guess if you perceive that as negative, so be it. But I think, to date, it has a questionable safety record, and there's a lot of questions about what's still coming, what has to be done. Going back to the engineering going on with Tesla's full self-driving efforts right now to get the Cybercab in operation in 2027, optimistically, is what Elon said. There's important safety questions to ask about how these vehicles safely get deployed in the real world. So I guess I don't read that as negative. I think that's important journalism right there. If we can't ask, what's the safety record of these vehicles? What's it going to be? How are we ensuring that they're going to be better than humans? And those are important questions to ask. And on the latter, I would just say this whole industry has walked back the idea that, 5 years ago, maybe it was during the initial hype phase, self-driving vehicles were supposed to be dramatically better than human drivers. As Mobileye talks specifically about going from 40,000 deaths on American roads to 40 every year. And now the whole industry has walked back to, we're going to be better than human drivers. That's a huge retreat. And, then we need to get into the details of, on what roads, in what road conditions. Are we talking better than sober human drivers or otherwise impaired human drivers? That bar gets lower and lower. If you put a competent driver out there who's not impaired, that's higher than average, because right now the average includes the stupid, drunk, and distracted drivers. So I don't know. That's another reckoning that I think the industry really needs to come to as some of these laws and regulations that I imagine are forthcoming get rolled out.
The industry's learned a lot. We went through the cycle of hype. We went through a lot of misstatements, and we've gotten much better as an industry from a communication standpoint. And you're right, the goal line always seems to be moving, and that goes for every company in this. We've seen multiple pivots. I think that companies are getting better in this. As you look at to 2027, I don't believe we'll see a robotaxi in 2027 from Tesla. I publicly stated I believe it's going to be 2030. And when I do say that, there's videos that have been surfacing on X of Tesla testing the robotaxi, aka the Cybercab, at Gigafactory. Could that be a sign of things to come? And if it is, do you think at some point in 2025, perhaps, that we see some testing in downtown Austin or the suburbs around Austin with a cyber cab, or do you think we're going to have to really look at 26 for that?
I don't know the exact time frame, but I think that the location makes sense. I think the general time frame makes sense. So that would be a practical way for Tesla to roll out the Cybercab. Yeah,
So, for all practical purposes, from January 20th, when President Trump is sworn into office for a second time, only second time in history behind Grover Cleveland, two non consecutive terms, President Trump, for all practical purposes, is going to have a year and a half to push through major policies. Obviously, for me, autonomous vehicles is the top of my agenda. As everybody knows, I'm a one policy horse. That's what I care about is autonomy because it's good for the U.S. economy. And we saw the announcement yesterday, and this has been verified and called by the AP for the source on this. The Republicans now have all three branches of government. They have the Senate, they have the House by the slim margin in the House, but they have it, and they have the presidency. With Mr. Musk, as I said earlier, spending time in the Mar-a-Lago Situation Room, could you see, in all practical purposes, that we could potentially get a national framework in the first year and a half? And I say that because Mr. Musk put out a tweet today, said most PACs go away after winning an election. The America PAC is doubling down. And so if the America PAC doubles down, the America PAC could put pressure on lawmakers that are flimsy or on the fence. So long-winded way of saying, do you think we could potentially see one in the first year and a half of President Trump's second term?
I do. I definitely think that that's on the transportation agenda. Like you said, and it's weird. Like if you look back at the history of the failed attempts for Congress to pass some sort of autonomous vehicle legislation, there's been bipartisan bills put forward that had support and leadership both from Senator Gary Peters from Michigan and John Thune from South Dakota. And that it did not get done kind of speaks to some of the, bedfellows in relationships with each other. But I think given that the Republicans likely have the House now and have the Senate, I definitely would expect some sort of national framework that eliminates the state by state patchwork of laws regarding autonomous vehicle operations. Definitely would expect in that some sort of forced arbitration for disputes that arise from crashes. Be a big swing at the trial lawyers who have probably successfully scuttled much of the legislation to this point. So I would think those things would be in law. And then I'd have to look at the interplay between the law and existing federal regulations. We might see some other things from NHTSA that kind of go in concert with this, or would it be addressed in the big law? But obviously, this exemption process that we've had for years is irreparably broken, in my opinion. There's caps on vehicles that I think will probably be removed, at the very least, by regulation. And then I think it's a question of, do you rework the current FMVSS, or do you have a whole new set for automated vehicles that don't have human drivers to kind of get around this idea of, well, do vehicles that don't have steering wheels and brake pedals need an exemption from federal motor vehicle standards? Right now they do. So I think that changes in a big way too.
If the liability issues are resolved, that to me is going to be the most challenging part of this is the liability issues. In a hypothetical world, it's on law, they're resolved, there's a framework for liability. Does that unleash the licensing era of autonomy, since Neuro's looking at licensing? Mr. Musk has publicly said on Tesla's earning calls they're looking at licensing. Could that, if the liability is set and we have a framework for autonomy, could that unleash the licensing era of autonomy?
It could. I think that's still in a very early stage. I think there's a lot of testing and validation that will need to be done between a licensor and licensee. And in some ways, it kind of gets back to the question that we were talking about with the major airlines and EVTOL providers before. Like, how much do I trust your technology with my brand? And those are steep hills to climb. So I guess in some cases, how much of that do you want in-house? How much do you want to bring in from elsewhere? And obviously there's a growing number of providers who are looking to provide their technology on a licensing basis, which I think we've even talked about on previous Road to Autonomy podcasts here, is how big is that addressable market in terms of licensing, particularly on the passenger vehicle side, is a big question. Obviously on the trucking side, I think it's more concrete.
On the trucking side, what's going to happen when Tesla puts FSD in the truck? They're testing it now. It's public knowledge they're testing it. There's no release date of when they're going to make it available and all that. What's going to happen? And I say that, and I will respect this person's privacy, but I will say one of the chief engineers for one of the large trucking OEMs is panicked. And I said, why are you panicked? He goes, they built the truck from the ground up. They integrated the autonomy from the ground up. And he goes, but more importantly, they integrated the battery hardware. The whole thing was built from the ground up. He goes, we were forced by management to take an existing chassis, electrify it. And he said, from the autonomy aside, on the electrification standpoint, he goes, we just cannot compete. Is that going to cause these traditional OEMs, which out for privacy remove their names, to rethink and rebuild these trucks from, if they're going to go battery electric and autonomy from the ground up?
Well, I mean, back to the political situation, how much does California's push for zero emission vehicles across the board, including passenger cars and Class 8 trucks, how much of that gets weakened right now by the incoming administration? Because suddenly, if you don't need to meet those mandates that are on the horizon, how much do you really want to invest in a battery? If you're one of those traditional truck makers you mentioned, how much do you want to invest in a all new truck chassis platform, battery integration? Like maybe you're just like, nah, we're gonna do what Chrysler did with 5-10 years ago, where when everybody else is making their huge autonomy investments, Chrysler was just like, I think we're going to keep selling SUVs here for a while. That would not be a bad play either, because I think that's an uphill climb to do what Tesla's doing on the truck front. And I think there's still a lot of questions as to battery electric Class 8 uses a lot of raw materials. And there's a lot of questions about how much range you can get out of a big battery that is already sapping your payload. I think the jury's still out on battery electric trucks, especially when you get to the bigger ones. So I don't know. I'd make that investment.
No, they're losing money. You go through their filings, they lose money. Do we see the end of electrification as we know it in a second Trump term? Because the companies don't have to invest in it. The mandates go away. If you look at GM, you look at Ford. Ford makes their money on Ford Pro and the traditional F-150, the gas one. GM makes most of their money on the internal combustion engine vehicles. Do we just see this rev power on, and they just say, we don't have to invest in this anymore, and they become a highly profitable? And if that does happen, are the unions happy? Because the unions have been very publicly fighting these EV mandates.
I'm going to ask a different question in response, and it's not just a cop-out answer, Grayson. What does Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis look like in America in 20 years?
Okay, so my opinion, GM is a fully integrated autonomy company selling personally owned autonomous vehicles, starting with the Cadillac going through various different ranges. Ford, in my opinion, Mr. Farley will choke me. The business is a Ford Pro business. I don't really see, I see their consumer sedan business shrinking. I see their consumer SUV business shrinking, becoming more of a utilities business. And Stellantis, its Operation Reboot the Jeep brand. The Wagoneer didn't work. If they can reboot the Jeep brand, does it become the Jeep brand again? That's my big three of looking at. Those are the big things I'm watching.
I think re-engineering this answer, but the tariffs right now that have been levied by the Biden administration, that I expect that we'll see continued and maybe doubled down upon in the incoming Trump administration, are probably in the short term the right answer for a ever more powerful Chinese EV market or EV imports. But I think ultimately they're a tax on American consumers over the long term. And how the likes of Ford, General Motors in particular, competes with low-priced Chinese electric vehicles is a really important question. And I don't know that. I think we're starting to see both administrations address the symptoms, and I think someone needs to really push them on. Well, I'll put it this way: I don't think electric vehicles are going away one way or the other. Whatever President Trump does or does not do, and I expect there will be things that happen. Perhaps first and foremost, the tax incentives and rebates will go away from the federal side in fairly short order. But over the long term, I think that automakers will need to find a way to make profitable electric vehicles. I don't know how the likes of Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis do that yet. Or maybe the other way to say that is, I think they need to make competitive electric vehicles. And I don't see that clear path right now. That's going to hamstring companies that to date have been multinational behemoths and now are here on a course to be more, niche bespoke manufacturers playing in very select markets across the world.
America could not compete outside of Tesla, could not compete with the Chinese on EVs. Mr. Farley has said it in the Wall Street Journal interview that he brought the Chinese vehicle over here and he says he doesn't want to give it up. We can't compete. It's the labor cost, it's the manufacturing cost, it's the vertical supply chain for electrification. We can't compete this time. That's why I said about GM that they're going to have to become an autonomy company. Miss Mary Barr has had her ups and downs and bruises and bumps along the way, but I believe she's right and she understands that's where the future is for GM. That's with Ford. They got to hope and pray that Ford Pro business continues, and Stellantis, if they can't revamp the Jeep brand, they're in trouble because at some point those Chinese vehicles will be here. I'm just going to be honest. We all know it. And the way that the cost structures are with the unions, and I'll say something controversial, Sean Fan, the United Auto Workers, could be the end of the Detroit Big Three because of the cost structure. There is no way the current cost structure, the way the union contract is set, that the Big Three in Detroit can compete with Chinese vehicles coming into America. And when I say coming into America, I mean tariff-free. If they're coming in tariff-free, there's no way they can compete. And if you talk to most people, including Mr. Farley, and this is not an assumption, this is not a fact, this is not an opinion, it's just publicly stating data, they're better vehicles. They're better user experiences. And we saw what happened in the Nuremberg. Chinese broke the record for the fastest lap. They're coming.
They are coming. And I think over time, and this might be a conversation we have in 10 years or 15 years, I think that the Inflation Reduction Act that sets up some of the battery supply chain here, oftentimes in red-leaning states, will be viewed as a long-term success if the American automakers are to get back on track. And that's one reason why I think that there's going to be a very public pushback against EVs, maybe at the start of the incoming administration. But you have battery plants going up in places like Tennessee and North Carolina and Kentucky. You have a lot of EV operations in Georgia. So you have these purple to red leaning states that are building burgeoning industries around this technology. And I don't think that President Trump and his advisors will want to roll that back in a way that would be painful for those communities. So I think that, again, kind of going back to what did President Biden do that maybe President Trump will get some credit for at some point, like the EVTOL industry taking off, as we said at the outset of this. I think that frankly, 4 years is probably too soon, but 10 years from now, we might look at that as a success. And I guess if you want to hold me to that, I'm going to say that the IRA is going to be a bigger success than what we probably currently give it credit for.
Well, I'll have you back on in 10 years and we'll go through that. I believe if you look at where President Trump's going, he'll get rid of the mandate and it'll become a consumer choice. And then the uptick and the adoption will slow. The market will continue to be controlled by Tesla and the consumer will choose. They're not going to be forced to go into a vehicle. And they're going to choose, and that's what we want. Just like if you want to choose to ride an autonomous vehicle, you can. If you choose that you want to ride an Uber, you can. And I believe that choice is coming back. The mandate's going away. The EV market will still be here in America. It'll just be growing slower than it currently is, and perhaps you could see some acceleration within Tesla vehicle sales if the FSD continues to improve the way it does. I own a Tesla. I drive a Tesla. I'm really curious what FSD 13 does, if it's really truly as magical as they say it is, because the 12.5.6.1 right now works really good. Is it an autonomous vehicle? No. Is it fun as heck to drive when I actually drive it? Yes. When I put it on FSD in certain environments, it's fantastic. But it is not an autonomous vehicle yet.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner, Grayson. Like, this is the thing about electric vehicles. I think what made Tesla is that it is an amazing experience to drive and own a Tesla vehicle. It's not necessarily about the powertrain. They've made a great vehicle, period. If others would follow suit and make a vehicle that is based on performance and or customer experience, like, this is the differentiator. This is how you scale electric vehicles in America. Tesla's the example. Like, people still have not caught on to that. Like, I think the number of people who are buying it because it's an electric vehicle is limited. I know it is some portion. It's not zero. This is not black and white. But why they've succeeded is because it's a vehicle that is fun to drive, fun to own, has terrific performance.
And you don't think about it. It just works. If I was an auto executive, I'd own a Tesla, and I'll give you a few highlights of the things that you don't even think about. You get in your car to drive your kids to school in the morning, the air conditioner is already set. It's already ready to go. You don't even have a key at your phone. You get in there, your music's all set, your seat's all set, it's all set for you, and you just tap your foot on the gas, and away you go. You don't even have to turn it into gear because it already knows where you're going. It already has your destination preset. It's all these little things, and as we all know, we don't need to beat this to a dead horse. The charging works, which has been a huge difference. But the car, you just don't think of like, wow, this thing's phenomenal. It just knows it gets ahead of what you're thinking. So okay, you get in school, it knows boop, and it just hit the tap for FSD and drives to school. It's great, and that's what the auto industry needs to get. They need to lean into the future. We are leaning into the future every time you're here, and I have a ton of fun every time you're on. And we're going to have you on before the end of the year again, just so you're fair warned. And for the listeners and viewers that give us really great feedback on LinkedIn and X, keep it coming, because Pete's going to keep coming back, and we're going to keep going all over the map on, I'll call him Grayson and Pete's Wild Adventures, because that's what he is. Every time we're here, we're on Wild Adventures. Pete, for today, what would you like the listeners and viewers to take away with them as we look to wrap up?
I'm going to leave us with a segue into part 2 before the end of the year, Grayson. Maybe I'm naive, but I think this whole electric vehicle push gets recast in the incoming Trump administration in some way as a push toward energy resilience, energy independence. And maybe the best way for an isolationist inclined administration to disentangle us from both Middle Eastern oil and Chinese raw materials is to look at how hydrogen fuel cell powered vehicles might play a prominent role in our energy independence. Look forward to picking it up there next time.
I like that. So it goes from drill baby drill to mine baby mine. Perhaps that's where it's going. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is customer choice. Pete, as always, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy.
Always a pleasure, Grayson. Thanks for having me.